Welcome to Quantum RX, the podcast that teaches you how to move beyond stuck emotions and trauma for mind, body, and spirit healing. I'm your host, Dr. Stephanie Davis. If you're curious as to if you have any stored emotions or trauma that might be causing your illness, preventing you from achieving your highest goals, or even just showing up as the best, most authentic version of yourself, I invite you to take my free Stored Emotions and Trauma quiz, and you will find that link in the show notes. Often in my work, whether it was working with patients on conditions or with clients on, the underlying emotions, trauma, or beliefs that, might be holding them back from something, certain themes tend to come up frequently in chunks. Like you'll see a bunch of people come into your practice with like Hashimoto's or mast cell issues or allergies, food-related allergies or something like that. And I get this confirmed by my friends and colleagues all the time. They have the same thing where there's a lot of batches of certain things coming in. And it's interesting because, before I had all of this knowledge and education, I didn't think much of it. But now I think it's more serendipitous and divine. I think that it's something that's happening for us to give us more knowledge. And we are basically conduits of the divine, right? Providing this knowledge and experience and support to people. And it's interesting because lately with the clients that I've been working with, there has been a massive theme. And it's interesting because I frequently reflect on my work with people. And it's interesting when I was, largely seeing functional medicine patients, it was, everything is in your practice software. But when I work with clients and I'm doing any kind of emotional trauma or nervous system regulation work, I have notebooks. I have these notebooks that I keep. I have bookshelves full of them because I keep these notes and I reflect back on them. And in the last 2 months specifically, I have seen this massive theme of people who are pushing too much in their lives and in several different ways. And they just need to let it go in order to move forward. Because energetically, when we push too much, we're trying to force outcomes. And this is not the way that, the world or the universe or the divine works. That's when we push, for a short period of time, it might work. But eventually, if you keep pushing, you're going to hit a bunch of obstacles. And a lot of times we don't take these obstacles as opportunities. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit later in the show. And I'm going to share with you my story because I was in this space too. And it wasn't until somebody pointed this out to me that I had the opportunity to reflect and shift and change. And when we do this, massive aha moments can happen. And so if you can relate to this, we're going to be doing a deep dive today. And what we're going to recover is what is the cycle of purging and surging? That's what I call it. I tend to call it purging and surging or purging and pushing, and how this cycle becomes a slippery slope. We're also going to talk about what happens when we just be and allow ourselves to live without trying to force these outcomes. And I'm going to talk about a few simple methods to help you shift from pushing to kind of more of that surrender and beingness. All right. So let's get into that moment. I'm going to start there because I feel like this was a pivotal situation for me. I was working on developing a new program, and it was interesting because I was at a transition moment. I feel like I've had in the past 4 years, I've had a lot of pivots in my life, specifically in my work. And it was basically culminating into what I'm doing now. But it was funny because one of the coaches I was working with, he just sat there and I was watching him. And as I was watching him on the other side of the screen, I was like, what is he thinking? Like he was just sitting there really patiently and he has a really just calm and intentional presence. And I always valued what he had to say because he was one of those people. I don't know if you can relate, but like one of those people when you see them when they walk into the room, they're not causing a stir. They're just there with like a quiet confidence. And some people notice them, some people don't. But when they speak, they tend to have something pretty valuable and powerful to say. So I was waiting for this moment with him. And he said, Stephanie, why don't you just stop pushing? It's like you push, push, push. You're full of like drive and, taking action or just spiraling, not necessarily spiraling, but like ruminating in your thoughts. He's like, why don't you just allow yourself to stop the pushing and see what happens? And then he recommended to me to use or read the book, The Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer. And I know I've mentioned that book before on the podcast, but it really was so significant to me because I have, for the longest time, I had embodied that push, that driver, that like I have to achieve, which is all very masculine oriented. And I wasn't, embodying much of my feminine or, they would also call the divine feminine, whatever terminology you want to use, because that would be more of kind of surrender and flow and acceptance. And I was not in that space at that moment. I was like, I've got to push, I've got to do, I've got deadlines, I've got these things that I need to get done. And when I did that, I know in previous podcasts, when I mentioned this, I said like my life just changed. Everything changed. Like things started to flow because my energy, my vibration, my alignment, and my purpose were all synced up together rather than there being this disjointedness and disconnectedness. And that's where we often get. And I see this so much in the people that I work with. It's, it manifests in different ways. It's, in the people I'm working with currently, for some people, it is like a trauma or past experiences that they're trying to move through so that it can get to be a different or upgraded version of themselves. For other people, they're in the transition of it's life transitions. Like there's a lot happening in their world and it's happening in all the aspects. It's happening personally. It's happening professionally. It's happening on a soul level. And we're working on all of that too, because sometimes your life does get upended in order for you to move on to the next stage in your next level of being, right? And I also have the people that I work with in their businesses. And when it's your business, it's also interesting because you really are your business, right? And it's fascinating because as we work on personal things, it reflects in their professional lives. And then vice versa. When we work on things professionally, it reflects in their personal lives because there is no separation there. But I end up seeing quite a bit of this, in the people that I work with. And specifically, I'm going to give you an example. There's one person that I work with, and he has been absolutely just killing it from a professional standpoint. But it's interesting because it's like he makes upgrades, either personally or professionally, and we see like upgrades in his business. And it's fascinating because a lot of times when things are good, it's like he can't just sit in the space of things being good. He always kind of defaults back to, what do I need to do? What do I need to do? Like I should be doing. What should I be doing? A lot of the shoulds, right? What should I be doing? I feel lazy if I'm not, doing things. It's been very hard for him to like get to this next level of success. And there's also some deservedness and worthiness and things tied into this too. And for him, it's been interesting because this has been a theme that we've worked on over months, and it comes back in different ways. And each time it kind of shows up in a little bit different way. But he actually realized, on this last call that we had, like that it's something that really needs to be taken to heart because If not, he's going to keep chasing and spiraling. And it's really interesting because he and I were talking, and I actually had the idea for this podcast because it's a really good example of even when you have all the successes, like happiness in your personal life, happiness in your professional life, where we can still get stuck in this cycle of surging and purging and how it becomes a slippery slope. And that's what we're going to dive into for that first main point. And when I say purging and surging, these are the characteristics that I tend to see with the people that I work with. It is rumination. You get stuck on ideas and thoughts and you can't clear them. You keep on coming back to them. It's something you sit there and you hyper analyze, right? I always say they get stuck in this pattern of analysis paralysis because then they try to get into the whole why? Why is this happening? It's because of this and this and this and this. And that is so much our conscious mind trying to rationalize things. And if any of you have been listening to me for any period of time, you know that one of my, famous phrases is the conscious mind. The subconscious mind is your truth teller. Your conscious mind is your rationalizing mind that lies to us and tries to keep everything baseline and because that's safe, right? And it's really, really interesting, right? I'm like, we need to trust that intuition because your intuition, your subconscious mind is going to be involved in that intuition. And that's where the truth lies. But yeah, you're going to get stuck in rumination, just cycling through these things over and over again. Analysis paralysis, confirmation bias. This is a really interesting one because I don't see this in everybody I work with. I would say of these people that I'm speaking about, right? I have this group of clients that I've been seeing these themes with on and off for the past 2 months or so, pretty dominantly. This confirmation bias one only shows up in about 50% of them. And it's essentially where I will bring something to their attention and their conscious mind does not want to hear that yet. They're not ready for it. So then they try to go find information, usually not in the right spaces. I don't think that all the videos online, right, on TikTok, on, social media, whatnot, are the best places for us to prove our point because we all know there's a lot of not so great stuff out there and it's not all the most objective information. And I'm not saying that there are some great things out there, but there's also a lot of stuff out there that's not great. We have to be very careful and very discerning with what we consume and truly identify with online. And one of the things that I do see some people do is go out and try to find, well, I saw all these videos, on TikTok or on, Instagram where people are talking about this particular whatever it is, and it's happening out there for other people too. So why can't it be the same for me? That could be the case, but also why is it happening to all of those people? And is that really validating your point? I am very much a believer in the fact that we are all individuals and we all have individual needs. So what worked for me in my diet, my lifestyle, even this type of work may not work for you. And I'm acutely aware of that. So that's why, that is literally to this day why I still do things like discovery calls, because I want to make sure that what I have to offer is what somebody needs and they're a good fit for me, right? And so, because I know, and if they're not, I will try to send them in the right direction to somebody that I think would be a better fit. So it's truly doing what's best for us. But sometimes when we get into that space of trying to prove our confirmation bias, and confirmation bias, if you don't know what that is, it is literally, seeking out information that proves your own beliefs and point of view and thoughts. That is something that seems to be a massive trend anymore, especially with all of the divisiveness in the world. And algorithms feed into this too. If Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn or something sees that you're looking at a lot of types of content, it's going to keep feeding you more of that, and it's going to further your confirmation bias. So there's also the people who like it's almost like a crutch, right? And so I see some of the people that I work with, they have this confirmation bias. Those are kind of like the main characteristics, that rumination, the kind of spiraling, the analysis paralysis, and in some cases, that confirmation bias. The symptoms that come up because of that typically are anxiety, overwhelm, stress, sometimes like a sense of sadness and or lacking control, just in general, lower vibration feelings, right? This results in them kind of creating obstacles for themselves. And those obstacles can be gifts. And that's what I do. My job is to reflect the fact that these obstacles have arisen because of these patterns that they are experiencing. And how can we, how can we take this obstacle and use it as a learning experience so that we can move forward, right? That's a lot of what I'm doing. And another big piece of this is all of these symptoms and all of these characteristics are essentially reflecting a lack of trust in yourself and or a lack of trust in the world. And a lot of times when you don't trust yourself, you're going to naturally have a lack of trust in the world, but that's what it's reflecting. There's something inside where there's a disconnect with that trust, that knowing, that intuition that you're doing the right thing. So that is essentially what it's reflecting. And it's a big piece of the puzzle on what we work on. Because when we get all of this, I always refer to it as like releasing the sandbags, releasing the mindset sandbags, the belief sandbags, the emotional sandbags, the trauma sandbags, all of these things that are holding us back, we can eventually soar and be the best, most amazing versions of ourselves. And that's not something that happens overnight. It's kind of like a spiraling up, experience. And I've spoken about that quite a bit. It's healing of any kind, any type of healing journey is never linear. It's like I always say, filled with ups and downs and sidewinding, trips and meandering expeditions. But we're always coming back to, things that we've revisited, peeling the layers of the onion and moving forward. And when we do this, when we truly understand and embody this, we just allow ourselves to be. And amazing things happen when we just allow ourselves to be, and we live without forcing outcomes. And what that looks like is you have an awareness. You have awareness that when these things are happening, you're like, oh, maybe these are hints that I need to change something, whether it is that belief, mindset, a trauma or past experiences where, there might have been coping mechanisms, right? That basically had you change your personality and how you truly innately are to fit somebody else's mold. These are all the things that can happen. And that tends to get us twisted up and tied up in knots. And we don't feel connected to ourselves because we're not living authentically who we are, right? And so you develop awareness, you develop trust that you can let life unfold and things happen for you and not to you. You have an awareness and an openness to new ideas and possibilities. Like you're not just focusing on, oh, this is my way and this is the only way. You might be going through life and see something that sparks a creative idea and you're like, oh, maybe that's a different way to do that. Or maybe you even go looking at different ways of executing the same idea, right? Because you know that there are other things, there are many, many, many other possibilities to achieve the same goal. Things might start falling into your lap, so to speak. There might be more synchronicities. That is because you are aligned, your purpose, you've got alignment in everything. It's funny because it's all of the things. You have alignment in your thoughts, your feelings, your purpose, and that allows you to essentially, we talk about vibrating at a higher level, right? In our thoughts, our feelings, all of that. And that's when these synchronicities start happening and things seem to fall in your lap. That's exactly what happened to me when my coach pointed that out. Like literally within a month of, kind of reading the book and then employing the ideas of surrender, my life changed. I mean, it was funny because I started getting clients in to my practice and my business, and I was not even trying. It was like literally like the universe was like, you finally learned your lesson. So I'm going to gift you with this. And things just started snowballing from there. The synchronicities were kind of crazy. I would think about something and it would happen. I would think about a person and they would call or text me. It was all of these things just started happening. So that will happen. You will have also thoughtful inquiry instead of like judging, analyzing, and grading everything, right? We tend, when we're in that space of like coming from fear, coming from anxiety, coming from those lower vibration spaces, we tend to, instead of being open-minded and looking at things with more kind of like just openness and discernment, we tend to be more judgy and analyzing and grading everything. And you'll notice this shift. I'm an INFJ and in my Myers-Briggs. And for those of you who don't know, that J stands for judging. So it's intuitively in my character to be judging, but that's judgment can come in different ways. And it's like, are you judging to be critical? Or are you judging to be observant and make a good decision? There's different ways you can, perceive this, right? And so I used to be judging in that analytical and critical space, whereas now I'm judging to try to be more objective rather than subjective. And in that objectivity, it's like, how am I viewing things? Am I getting all the messages and, gifts, meanings, awarenesses from my experiences? So that is a big change for people. Another thing is along that same line is you consider all of your options, right? You realize that there isn't just one way and that there are infinite possibilities out there. So you start considering more options. And when you're sitting in this space of more surrender rather than, pushing, when you're more in just being rather than pushing, things happen differently, things transpire differently. And you will see that this results in you having much higher vibration feelings on a mostly daily basis, like calmness and peace and love and gratitude and authenticity. And that's not to say that you're not going to have bad days, because we all do. In the last probably maybe month, maybe full month, I know I was going through some internal changes, and I was also working with a friend of mine on this. It was something that I knew that I didn't want to tackle on my own. And she helped me work through a lot of this stuff. It was kind of like she was, she does work similar to what I do. She's trained in all the same and similar methodologies, but she also has a few things that are uniquely her own too. And it was interesting because I could feel myself wanting to go into that space of pushing. I just want to know now. But I was very conscious to fight that because I haven't felt that in a really long time. But I knew I was on the precipice again of another kind of major shift up. And I knew it was coming because I could tell the signs were there. Like things were just a little bit off. I started having more like I was a little bit irritable. Things were coming up. Like some of my past traumas, experiences were coming back to me. And even though I had worked on them before and totally like transformed them, it was little pieces of them that were just showing me a little bit different perspective of something I needed to work on. And I knew the topics I needed to work on. And I was just like, I knew inherently this is where that trust comes in. I knew it wasn't something I was going to be able to work on by myself. I knew who I needed to work with. I was like, I knew instantaneously this was the friend and colleague I needed to work with because she was going to help me, kind of dissect and dive through all of this. And what came out afterwards was pretty, in my opinion, it was like a revelation for me. She helped me work through some seemingly simple on the surface stuff. But for me, I knew it was really deep because it was rooted in all of those, traumas that I had transformed previously. And so I had all of that knowingness, but I had this space of like 2 weeks where I was like, I just want to know. I just want to know. And I was doing some homework of myself and I was like allowing downloads to come through. And it was funny because I was messaging her and I kind of felt bad. And I was like, please tell me if this is too much. But she was like, no, this is actually good information for me to, understand and have context for what we were actually working on. And it was tough. I mean, I will say it was tough because I had been doing the kind of, surrender part and taking action when necessary and when indicated thing really, really well until this moment. And so I understand that internal drive to want to act on something or do something immediately. But because I didn't do that, she and I had our meeting. And since then, like it's been another kind of like overflow of amazing things that have been happening. So it's just a good lesson to like once you have this awareness to use that to your advantage, right? And use that for your purpose and your being. And so yes, those are all of the things that happen when we switch from pushing to just being and allowing, right? And if you know that this is something that you need to work on, there are some simple methods that I use when I'm working with people to allow them to kind of let this process unfold for them. Here's a few simple methods to kind of shift yourself from that pushing to surrendering and being and taking. I also like to say that it's taking inspired and taking inspired divine or aligned action, all of these things, right? Instead of just pushing for the sake of pushing and doing for the sake of doing. So if you're in that spot, the things that I ask people to do are focus on where your thoughts, feelings, and actions are not in alignment with your values, purpose, and energy. And I know that sounds like a lot, but it's like when you're sitting there on a day-to-day basis, where are your thoughts going? When you have these thoughts, how's it making you feel? And are you acting on these things? And when you're acting on these things and they're not in alignment with your true, authentic values, your sense of purpose, and your energy, you're going to feel that internally. And it's going to come up as things that we were talking about before: rumination, analysis paralysis, confirmation bias, also anxiety, overwhelm, creating obstacles in your life where there don't have to be, not trusting yourself and your intuition. That's what it's going to look like. And for some people, it's as simple as giving them this awareness. This is what I've seen over the years in working with people. It's as simple as saying, hey, what about this? Shifting their focus, shifting their awareness, and we'll talk it through. We in my world, we talk it through maybe in a session or two. We change those mindsets, we change those, beliefs, and they're ready and they're good to go. I will say that's typically people who've done a lot of emotional and trauma work, belief and mindset transformation and shifting already. They can kind of take this, embody it, and then kind of be off and running. For other people, there is the caveat. Sometimes if these things that you're doing are rooted deeply in certain mindsets or beliefs or experiences that were rooted in trauma or developed as a coping mechanism for a coping mechanism to basically feel validated and feel worthy and feel seen and feel loved, that can be a little bit more difficult and will probably require some kind of, release or nervous system retraining. So there's, that piece of the puzzle. And so again, it's like trying to decide what works best for you, but that awareness, the understanding and identifying that this is where you are is key. So like I said, for some of you, it might be as simple as, retraining those thought patterns and those mindsets, and sometimes even beliefs. Like beliefs typically are a little bit more deeply held than mindset. Mindset is something that's a little bit easier to change than beliefs in my experience. But if it is something that's rooted in, experiences, coping mechanisms, emotions, or trauma, it might be something that, you might have to work a little bit deeper on. Another thing then that I tell people to do when we're kind of in this process, because I walk people kind of through like a step-by-step process when we're addressing this, ask for divine help, right? Ask whatever it is that you believe in, God, spirit, source, the universe, the divine, divine love. There's so many different names for it. Whatever your belief in a higher power is, you could use this statement. You can say, I don't understand it. I don't like it, but I surrender it to you since you have my best interest at heart. That is very simple, but also very powerful and profound, because if you do that exercise and you truly embody it and feel it, it literally does, like it's a weight that's lifted off your shoulders, and it can be very freeing to have that. I also have a few different exercises that I have, probably two or three of them, that I give people to also further anchor this. But I often will have them, just do this, because it really can be, if something's weighing on your mind. I still do this sometimes. I'll say, God, spirit, source, divine, I don't understand it and I don't like it, but I surrender it to you since you have my best interest at heart. And that little shift just causes, a ripple effect, and things just start to flow a little bit easier after that. And you will get tested. You'll get tested after you have this awareness and you start to kind of live in this space. You'll get tested by the choices you make and the thoughts that you have. I feel like that often is when I'm in the process of doing all of this work and kind of like transforming and transmuting. And a lot of people like to throw out the word alchemizing, like really embodying things. It'll be funny because I feel like I'm getting tested. It's like I'll have somebody, an experience, like I'll get a phone call or somebody will text me or something that'll happen that'll test my boundaries and test my beliefs and mindsets, all of those things. And it gives me the opportunity to step up. I've had that happen quite a bit lately. I recently, when I was in the midst of this 4-week period, I received a text message from somebody, and I'm not going to get into the details of it just because I don't want to out this person, but I can give you the general ideas of it. They asked me to do something that very much on core and principle I would not do. And it was funny because when I got it, like I felt it, I read it, and I was like, I can't even believe this person's asking me to do this because of my past experiences with the situation. They were basically asking me to do a favor for somebody who had deeply hurt me and harmed me in the past. And I was like, no, oh, hell no, I am not doing that. And it was like a hard, like I said, hard stop, not doing this. And I felt good after that, but it was kind of funny because the person who I was responding to doesn't necessarily have the best boundaries and has not dealt with a lot of their emotional stuff. And so that person then took that. They said okay, which was great. It was great that they said okay, that they honored what I was saying, but then they went and had to like make something up to justify why I wouldn't do it for that person. And I was like, you know what? That's you. That's your experience. That is what you're going through. And that's not mine. It's like one of those ideas. It's funny because a client I work with said this to me the other day, and I've heard this over and over and over again in my work. And it's great to think about and embody. Shout out if you're listening and you're that person that I was working with, because I know you listen to the podcast. She reminded me of the idea of what's yours is yours and what's mine is mine. I've heard that over and over and over again in my work, and it's so true because we can get caught up in and embody other people's stuff if we're not careful. And when I sent that text and I saw, what this person's response was, that was exactly the idea of what I was thinking. It was that same kind of, well, what's yours is yours and what's mine is mine. And, this is a delineation because I'm going to sit here in my most authentic self with my boundaries and, who I am and the trust I have in myself. And I'm not going to get caught up in your stuff. I mean, that was a very conscious choice. And then I went on with the rest of my day, and it was, just normal and peaceful and great and had flow. But it's something that's been coming up a lot. And so I thought it was important to do a podcast on this. And so I really just want you to think about, are you in these cycles of, purging and pushing? That happens a lot for people, or I call it purging and surging, where you sit there and you just verbally vomit, right? You're just like, you just can't stop talking, or ruminating in your head, right? And then you're surging ahead and you're just going, and, putting all this energy out there. And it's really not getting you to where you want to go or what you want, right? So if you're in that space, I really encourage you to try to look at some of the things that I put out here today. And if you're, having trouble with that, go ahead and, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. If you're having any issues like along these lines, when the comments come through, I answer them. And if you've worked through this too, similarly, if you were in that cycle of, kind of purging and pushing, and it was keeping you stuck, what was it that allowed you to move through that? Was it, kind of learning how to surrender to the process and work with life and work with your own innate energy and your gifts and, just yourself, right? What was it? What was it that helped you? I'd love to hear from you in the comments. And as always, I will see you next time, and sending you all lots of love. If you made it this far, I truly appreciate you. Remember, knowledge is just the beginning. Taking action is what truly sparks change. If you're overwhelmed and don't have enough energy to make it through the day, I invite you to book a free 20-minute coaching call with me. It's a no-obligation chat where we can discuss your health goals and how I might be able to help you achieve them. Visit the link in the episode description to book that call. Until next time, keep striving for wellness, and remember, you have the power to not just survive, but thrive in motherhood.